Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Manns, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the October 23rd, 2023 edition of the show. It is the 476th show that we have done since the closing of the North Adams Regional Hospital, and the 16th one that we have done since the announcement of its possible reopening sometime in hopefully 2024. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as is our custom, we put the spotlight on Article 23 at the start of the show.
All right. Article 1, or Section 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Section 2, everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration or compensation, ensuring for himself or herself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Michael.
Okay. Number 4. Everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for his or her protections and interests.
There we go. So,
I like Michael's hat. What's that button say on top of your hat, Mike?
If I am correct, this button says, united we bargain, divided we beg.
correct. I like it.
And we have used it before on the picket line.
We have
I got a couple other pins I add to it sometimes.
pin. And it's a very true saying.
Yeah.
If you're not united, then you're just
You'll
waiting for
fall.
the crumbs to fall off the table to you.
Solidarity forever.
Oh, yeah.
Susan, welcome. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good today. Not too bad.
That's great.
I'm here.
She's here. Yes,
I
she
got
is.
it.
Liz, we're very happy to have you back.
Thank you.
Take a lot of pressure off of us.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Sorry I had to miss
We're
last week.
sorry, too,
but
for your loss.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yes.
Yeah.
My sister was wonderful. But
I'm good for a small paragraph and that's it. The rest you all got to pick up. She doesn't come in. Hey,
you had to do it all. You had to converse with Dick, huh?
Yeah, we actually
don't want to
did.
break
That
out
can
the,
be very
don't
hard.
want to, don't
but
want to
yeah.
break out of the system.
Well, today we were going to talk about the what's going on in
the Middle East?
in the Middle East with the problem in Gaza and in Israel with the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel, and now the response. We talked a little bit about it at the end of the show, last show, just a few minutes. We didn't talk very much. But we wanted to look back in history, and we got a video to maybe give us an overview of what the history in that region is. And so we can talk from intelligence, at least. And you can't know anything unless you know the history. And so let's watch this little history lesson and see what we can pick up from it.
Israel, the world's only Jewish state, located east of the Mediterranean Sea, and Palestine, the territory of the Arab population that hails from the Israel-controlled land, have long been known for their enduring conflict with the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The tension between Israel and Palestine has been deteriorating in years, climaxing with many violent clashes between the two sides. To understand the root of the Israel-Palestine conflict, we have to look back a few thousand years ago. Early history of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In the 17 centuries BC, following the call of God, 3 patriarchs of the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, settled in Canaan, a region approximating present-day Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, parts of Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. The region later had the name the Land of Israel, the Promised Land, the Palestine region, or the Holy Land. In 1000 BC, King Saul established the Israelite monarchy, which then was ruled by King David, who made Jerusalem the capital of his kingdom, and his son King Solomon, who built the first temple in Jerusalem. After the death of King Solomon, the united monarchy was split into the Kingdom of Israel in the north, with Samaria as the capital, and the Kingdom of Judah in the south, with Jerusalem as the capital. The land became home to a majority of Jews, but then it was subject to numerous conquests of various groups, leading to the significant decrease of the Jewish population on the land. One of these conquests was conducted by the Roman Empire, who gave the name Palestine to Judah, intending to break the Jewish connection with the land of Israel. During this time, Christianity, which started as a Jewish sect, ultimately became a dominant religion toward the end of the Roman Empire. In the 7th century came an Arab conquest, beginning the spread of Islam. The Dome of the Rock was built on the ruin of the Second Temple, making Jerusalem the holy city to 3 monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. After Christians in Jerusalem were intensely persecuted by the Seljuk Turks, a Central Asian empire with ambition to expand its territory, Christians in Europe launched several crusades to bring the holy city back to the hand of the Christians. During this time, many Jews were killed. Others were making pilgrimages everywhere, mostly in Western Europe. From the 16th century to World War I, the Holy Land, along with much of the Middle East, was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, an Islamic superpower. The land was unofficially called Palestine. At the same time in Europe, more and more Jews were joining a movement called Zionism, aiming to create a Jewish national state in its ancient homeland. Hence, in the first decade of the 20th century, tens of thousands of Jews moved from Europe back to the region. Israel and Palestine under the British rule. World War I exploded and ended with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Its land in the Middle East was carved by the British and French empires. The British then gave more independence for Iraq and Jordan, and the region remaining under the control of Britain was what it called the British Mandate for Palestine, where Britain promised to establish a Jewish national homeland under its Balfour Declaration, which went into effect in 1923. Tensions between the Jews and the Arabs who both claimed the land grew, which even led to acts of violence. By the 1930s, following the increasing Jewish population in Palestine due to the fear of persecution during the Nazi reign in Germany, the British limited Jewish immigration. In response, the Jewish militias formed to both fight the Arabs and resist the British rule. Then came the Holocaust throughout Nazi Germany, which claimed almost 6 million Jewish lives. After the war, more and more Jews then fled from Europe to Palestine to seek a homeland, escalating the tension with the Arabs. Overwhelmed by the situation, Britain began to withdraw from the region. The birth of the Israel state. After World War II, the UN proposed a plan to partition Palestine into 2 independent states, a Jewish state and an Arab state, with the city of Jerusalem becoming an international zone with a special status. However, the plan according to which the Jewish, accounting for only 1/3 of the population, was granted more territory, 56.5% of the land, was rejected by the Arabs. They began to form volunteer armies throughout Palestine. Less than 1 year after that, as Britain completed its withdrawal from Palestine, Israel declared itself an independent state, marking a new, bloodier chapter in the struggle between the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Right after the announcement of an independent Israel, a war between the Arabs and the Jews broke out, which was known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The war involved 5 recently independent Arab nations: Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, the Arab League, who invaded the region in an attempt to establish a unified Arab Palestine. However, a ceasefire agreement was reached a year later in which more than 2/3 of historic Palestine, including the West Jerusalem, belonged to Israel, while Jordan occupied East Jerusalem and the area known as the West Bank, and Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip. As a result, more than 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from the land where they lived for centuries on the day that they call Al-Nakba, or the catastrophe. With the deteriorated dispute between the Jews and the Arabs, there came more wars and fighting in the following decades. The 60-Day War. It was in 1967 when the 60-Day War broke out after a volatile period of diplomatic friction and skirmishes between Israel and its neighboring Arab states, Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. This brief war ended with the victory of Israel, giving Israel control over the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Sinai was later returned to Egypt under the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty. After the war, most Palestinian refugees and their descendants were not allowed to return to their homes, but had to live in Gaza, the West Bank, and neighboring Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. The First Intifada and the Oslo Accords. The rising number of Israelis settling in the Palestinian territories in the West Bank and Gaza gave rise to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, first founded in Cairo, Egypt in 1964 to create a liberated Palestine in Israel. The PLO launched attacks on Israel from its base in Jordan. It was then forced to move from Jordan to Lebanon, starting to carry out acts of terrorism against Israel. Fighting went on for years, including the Israeli invasion of Lebanon to kick the PLO out of Beirut. The PLO eventually agreed to divide the land between Palestine and Israel, but there were still more and more Jewish settlers moved into the Israel-occupied Palestinian territories. In 1987, a violent Palestinian uprising was ignited, starting from the Jabalia refugee camp after an Israeli Defense Forces truck collided with two Palestinian civilian vans, killing 4 of them. This was known as the First Intifada. This bloody conflict, resulting in hundreds of deaths, triggered a peace process with the signing of the Oslo Accords by Israel and the PLO, the Oslo I Accord signed in Washington, D.C., and the Oslo II Accord in Taba, Egypt. According to the Oslo Accords, the West Bank was divided into 3 areas. Area A was exclusively controlled by the Palestinians. Area B was controlled by both the Palestinians and Israel. Area C was fully controlled by Israel. The Second Intifada. Though further peace talks continued in 2000, the Israelis and Palestinians could not reach agreements on issues like the status of Jerusalem, rights of refugees, and the increased Jewish settlement in Palestinian lands. Ariel Sharon, a Jewish Israeli who would later become Israel's prime minister, visited the Temple Mount, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The action was deemed offensive by many Palestinians, and the Second Intifada broke out. The violence ended with Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, but continued to settle in the West Bank. Israel conflict with Hamas. Hamas is a Sunni Islamist militant group aiming to destroy the state of Israel and create an Islamic state. After the armed conflict between Hamas and Fatah, who managed the PLO, Hamas split from the Palestinian Authority and gained power in the Gaza. Israel put Gaza under a suffocating blockade, leading to several bloody wars between the two groups in the Gaza Strip, including Operation Cast Lead, Operation Pillar of Defense, and Operation Protective Edge. In 2014, Hamas and Fatah reached agreement to form a national unity government. In 2018, the U.S. Embassy was relocated from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which was deemed by the Palestinians as a signal of American support for Jerusalem as Israel's capital. 2021, the conflict between Israel and Palestine was reassumed by a series of hostile events in East Jerusalem, leading to several acts of violence until a ceasefire deal brokered by Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations came into effect on May 21st. Peaceful though it may seem now, the complex and long-lasting territorial dispute between two states is a ticking time bomb that can explode any time.
And it did explode.
Yeah, the bomb went off. And that's the situation that we're in right now.
Right. And the history shows you that they've never found a solution to it. It just keeps repeating itself, the cycle.
The violence never seems to end, and it's very confusing to me. I've watched that several times.
Me too.
It's One thing I know for sure, they keep saying the 60-day war, even though it was the six-day war.
Yeah.
But they did talk about like the two-state solution with an international zone, and that somehow
They think that's going to work?
that's what originally was the plan.
That
And it
was.
really, and right now we're sort of sitting in a three-state solution where they have Gaza is one state, and then the West Bank and Israel in between.
In
Yeah,
between, and
and that's not working either.
no,
So
it's not. I mean,
we're hoping for a solution. But the worst thing is there's just a lot of poor people in that area that are not non-combatants, but are falling victim. They're, you know,
there, and that's the sad legacy of war,
yeah.
is that though the people who start it don't think about the damage they do to everybody who doesn't want the war. I mean, I don't think there's a single Palestinian mother who wants her son in Hamas or in the war any more than I think there's an Israeli mother who
Right.
wants her
We did a
children
show a
in
few
the war.
months ago with Maynard Cedar and his wife through Zoom, and they talked about an organization that they were working with. There were veterans of the Israeli army and of the Palestinian army working for peace. We have to find out where that organization is right now.
If it
But
still exists.
before we go too much further, we have another video we like to show because Bernie Sanders stood up on the Senate floor and he gave an impassioned speech about the situation of those people in Gaza. So let's have a listen to what Bernie has to say, and take note that Bernie is Jewish.
Madam President, I listened carefully to what Senator Scott and others have said about the barbarous act committed by Hamas against innocent men, women, and children, the mowing down by machine guns of young people who were doing nothing more than attending a dance, the murder of babies. This is an horrific act precipitating a worldwide crisis. And the United States of America, all of us, condemn this act. And in my view, the state of Israel has the absolute right to defend itself against Hamas and terrorism in general. No debate on that. But what I ask my colleagues to also consider is that while we fully appreciate the horrific attack by Hamas against innocent people of Israel, I ask you also to understand that right now there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza who have lost their homes. They've been thrown out of their homes. They have no food, they have no water, they have no fuel. And I remind my colleagues that half of those people are children. Half of the people in Gaza are children. So yes, we are united in doing everything we can to destroy Hamas and their terrorism. But I implore you, do not take Hamas's inhumanity and brutality and terrorism against children who are 3 or 5 years old. I ask you to think for a moment. Think about it. I have a state, represent the state of Vermont, 630,000 people. 1 million people, most of them are poor. They got nothing to begin with. Before this whole business, Gaza was one of the most desperately poor places in the world. Youth unemployment, 75%. Many of their people depended on the UN for basic survival. So what I'm asking people to take a look at is to understand what our country is about. And what our country must not be involved in is making the horrific and miserable situation in Gaza even worse. Many of the families, and again, these are people thrown out of their homes. They don't know where they're going. They don't know who will accept them. They don't know if they're ever going back to their homes, and they're poor to begin with. And do we really want to deny those people aid from the UN and other agencies to feed the children, to provide water for them? Is that really what we are about? So, of course, it goes without saying that we have got to do everything that we can to make sure that not one nickel goes to the murderous Hamas organization. But at the same time, we have got to stand with the innocent women and children in Palestine who are suffering today and are facing an almost unprecedented modern humanitarian disaster. So, Madam President, today, in the midst of this crisis, U.S. and UN assistance in Gaza is aimed squarely at addressing the basic needs of the Palestinian people, including humanitarian aid and water and health programs. The U.S. and the UN go to great lengths to ensure that aid gets to the people who need it and is not diverted, as do trusted partners like Catholic Relief Services. The Israeli government itself recognizes the importance of this UN humanitarian aid and has long supported it. Today, in the midst of this horrific crisis, the United States and the international community are working to secure humanitarian access, and what media reports I have seen recently, we may be making some progress in that, so that the UN can get food and water and fuel and medicine to the million or more people in Gaza who need essential supplies. That should be our focus. There are people now facing hunger. They are facing incredible desperation, and we cannot turn our backs on them. If you think this is going to be good for Israel, if you think that the suffering of the Palestinian people long term is good for Israel, I think you are sorely mistaken. The world is looking at us, and the world understands that what Hamas did was terrible, but they don't want to see our great country turn its back on innocent women and children. That, in my view, is not what this country is about. This is a tough issue. There have been 4 wars there in the last 15 years, and ain't going to be solved tomorrow. But while we do our best to support Israel and destroy Hamas, please, let us not turn our back on the suffering people in Gaza. This is not what we should be doing, not what Congress should be doing, and therefore I object.
Yes.
That took a lot of courage on Bernie's part.
Yeah.
It had to be hard to argue for the compassion side on the other side. I agree with him completely, because in war, there are victims on both sides.
Yeah.
And you can't favor one over the other. And unfortunately, the coverage at first was so lopsided in Israel's direction. You know, I mean, this isn't like Ukraine, where Russia's clearly the aggressor and the Russian people haven't had a great deal of suffering on their side yet. This is one where both sides are suffering at the same time.
Yeah.
And the aid should get there.
Yeah. Without fuel, they can't keep their hospitals open.
Without water and medicine, they can't treat
Right.
people, and without food and water. And Israel cut off the electricity.
Right.
And I know why they did, but because they controlled it. And they knew that was a way to weaken Hamas.
Yeah. The thing is, the people probably don't support Hamas. They haven't had an election there since 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And half the country, well, the median age in the country is 19 years old. So, you know, half the country never, you know, they
Doesn't
never-
even know anything other than Hamas.
And I don't
being
think
in
they
charge.
support him as much as, you know,
As
you know,
they
but
just
they're people that are with the guns, and they run things. And there's, you know, and there's a governmental aspect of Hamas, and then there's the military
Military
aspect.
aspect, and-
And sometimes they don't even work together. So,
Obviously.
you know, we had another video that we were going to show about Hamas, but it would have taken too much time. But they're out there. You should try to learn about the
study it.
history of, yeah. But I really feel strongly for a ceasefire. I called my congressman's office, I called my senator's offices. I said, I believe in Israel's right to exist. I believe in Israel's right to defend themselves. But I also do not believe in collective punishment, that you just don't punish everybody for the acts of what some
Somebody
people
who
did. You know, and I asked them to stop call a ceasefire till we can get in there and just see,
And see if
Help
there's a way to
everybody.
rebuild again.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we have to look at it differently, because 3-state, 2-state doesn't work. I think they both have to be in one state. They have to find a way to create.
Yeah, I don't think
one
that's ever
state.
going to happen. I strongly feel there should be a two-state solution, but there should be a geographical area that becomes the Palestinian state.
State.
Right now,
Right.
there's not.
No.
With Palestinian control, and I think,
They're
We're
stuck-
hoping-
It's kind of like being on the reservation for the Indians in the
Yeah.
United States right now.
right, exactly.
And that, we all know that didn't work here.
That doesn't work, no. So it's,
When I was in the, I think it was job lot, I was going through, and they said, would you contribute to Israeli, the Israelis? And I said, sure, I would love to. You know, there are women and children and people without water.
Oh, yeah. I tend to give to the Red Cross in these situations, because I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it's going to get where it's
Yeah.
supposed to. Or like they said, the Catholic, I haven't seen anything from the Catholic Relief Services yet on this one. But
yeah,
I heard a lot about it, though, and when I was in church about it. They talked a lot about it as soon as it happened.
yeah.
Made us everybody aware of it.
Right, it's the hatred that, the dehumanization, calling people animals and things like that. We have to, like in union negotiations, you always have to have mutual respect. And you have to develop that mutual respect. I know it's hard in the middle of a
Mike,
war.
come on. I saw the eyebrow go off. You want to say something?
I know some very, I don't know what you want to call them, companies, but they had to have somebody that could take them on and not walk away. And the people I represented, we were there to the end, and they got the benefits. That's good.
Yeah,
Yes.
But it's a tough fight, too.
yeah.
And it's always a tough fight, because when there's an imbalance like this.
Right, when people are living in such poverty, other people take advantage of that poverty for their own interests, and they don't have the best interest of those who are in poverty.
No.
I feel that, if we could feed the people over there, if we could find some way of finding peace over there, I think everyone would like to visit. It's a wonderful part of the world. I think that they would probably become the richest part of the world,
Yeah.
because people would love to go there if they
And
weren't
it's
worried about
right,
a
being
war.
a war, and it's got such great history to offer
Yeah,
and stuff.
so.
And we have about 12
Yeah,
seconds
so
left.
I know it's not about labor issues, but it's a big issue and it's real important. And we
Yeah.
hope we can find a peaceful way to solve this. Keep
And
praying about
see you
it.
next
It's
week.
tough.
I thought,
Too long.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. Mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of mud. War's always been the boss's wife.